Previously on our BMW R80 resto, we found out that it wasn't going to start with just fresh petrol. This time we investigate and overcome these starter and ignition problems, and a shout out for the help from our son Liam in this video. Also, look out for the mean green ninja at the end of this video that has a blown clutch. In a later video it will be the subject of open engine surgery to get Luke, a young biker friend, back on the road again. I'm Pete and this is Spokenspanner. So let's see how our R80 came to have an electric boot in the first place. Remember the fire triangle, where we need to combine oxygen with fuel and ignite it with a spark to achieve combustion. The air in a combustion engine is sucked in, and so to get the air in, the engine has to rotate. As the piston is pulled down, it creates a vacuum and sucks the air into the engine. On early motorbikes, the rotation was achieved by means of a kickstart, shown here on a BMW R70 Series 5. But as engines became larger and more powerful, the kickstart was insufficient or too fragile to achieve this. The first electric start was developed in 1914 by the largest motorcycle company in the world at the time, Indian. The Springfield factory was right next door to the factory that produced the combined starter generator used on the 1913 Cadillac that was the first electric start car and inspired Oliver Hendy to apply the principle to the Indian motorcycle. Here is the Indian assembly line that had not yet become automated like Ford, and in 1914 they produced the Indian Hendy Special. Of course, with only 6-volt motorcycle electrics available at the time, it took two hefty 6-volt batteries to crank the 7-horsepower motorbike. Early problems with the first starter system included vibration causing battery failure, overheating of the starter motor to the point of destruction, and the batteries draining way too quickly. The bike was subject to 3 recalls, first to fit magnetos, second to fit kickstarters, and third to finally remove the heavy starter motors, and explains why only 3 complete Hendys are known to survive, and the whole episode left Oliver Hendy to split from his business partner Oscar Hedstrom. After using electric start on some of their home models, it was only in 1968 that Honda put an electric start on their CB350 as a unique selling point for the American market. Unfortunately, it wasn't popular, and owners preferred to use the notoriously fragile kickstart, giving rise to numerous warranty claims. However, with the 1969 CB750, they got it just right, with a more robust kickstart as a backup, and this was the bike that coined the phrase, the electric boot. The European and British bike industries, however, had to catch up, and the /5 series introduced electric start to BMWs in 1970, when the bikes moved over from 6-volt to 12-volt electrics. 1974 was the last year BMWs came stock with kickstarters, and after that up to around 1980 they could still be specified as an option. In contrast, amongst British bikes, it took 6 years before Norton Commando got the electric start, and Triumph's Bonneville didn't get the system until 1980. So how does the electric starter work? The solenoid at the top of the picture is a high current switch and also has an actuating arm that moves the pinion out to engage with the flywheel teeth. The main motor part, through a series of planetary gears, spins the flywheel that rotates the engine and causes the pistons to draw in the air. And today the system's pretty foolproof, well, until it isn't. And that brings us back to our all-electric start R80, and time to look under the tank. To get access to the top cover here, because the starter motor is under this cover, first we've got to take off the entirety of the airbox covers. So we'll take off both intake tubes from the carbs, take out the centre bolt and remove those, and they can be cleaned while they're off. And then we also have to take off the front cover, I think, but we'll see when we get to that point. I think if these are off, then it can probably move around, and we remove these 2 screws. So first job is to remove these intakes. So it's unlikely, but stuck starter motors can sometimes free off with a tap. That is not going to do a thing. The next stage, having gained access, is to get the starter motor out, and there are two bolts, 13mm bolts, one down here and one particularly awkward critter on this side, because I don't know if you can see that, but this casting here is right in the line. So I have to use an angled socket for that, and then inside here, through the timing case, there's another bolt in there, which we also have to remove in order to lift the starter motor out from the bike. Having disconnected the wires and removed the 3 bolts holding it, the theory is now that it should be possible to lift out the starter motor from its housing. It's worth knowing that interference between the starter motor and the engine housing can be a problem to be avoided. In this case, it's just stuck after 44 years. As you'll see when the new one drops cleanly in later in this video. This is why I stuck with the Bosch original starter motor rather than a Valeo or other make. The way to sort out a problem if it arises is to file back the engine case where it makes contact. Just freed it off. Certainly free at the back. At the front, it's a different story. Got it free now. The Haynes manual's great. It says lift clear. I must say I'm not as impressed with the Haynes manual for this bike as I have been for others. Oh, there's the secondary air system connection with the reed valve. So we're just going to clean up this connections and terminals, and we might just put some power to it and see if it turns. But certainly looking inside, the gear, Bendix gear, is not stuck at all. And spray a bit of lubricant into that and see whether it turns over. Do it from the back of the bench. And that's held in place. And connect that to the positive on your battery. And the negative lead goes from the battery negative terminal to the casing of the starter motor. Right, now all being well, when we make the connection between the power and the solenoid, and what happens is that the gear is extending out but isn't spinning at all. I've stripped out the bushers, cleaned the armature and set it back up for another bench test, and unfortunately no difference. There's still no spination from the motor at all. Okay, so I think this is US. It's going to be a case of a replacement, as it does seem like that motor has completely ceased to work. Today's a good day as we received our new starter motor for the BMW. I went for a reconditioned Bosch example of the same type as the existing to try and keep the bike as authentic as possible, and also it guards against any fitting issues with using the original bracketry. Before we can do that, there's a bit of cleaning up to be done. This is the area that forms an airbox with each of the sides. That all needs cleaning out, and this is the bay for the starter motor. I've masked it off so that we don't get any water or dirt into the flywheel area, and we're going to give that a clean up. I haven't entirely decided on the best cleaning medium for these areas. I've got some Furtan, which is aluminium corrosion, removes corrosion from aluminium cleaner. It's quite a greasy compound on there, maybe just been sprayed with some oil before it was packed away, and the dirt's built up on it. So I'm also thinking maybe some gunk off, which will destroy the grease in that area, and then just hose it off. Obviously I want to keep any pressure washers away from it now that we're at this stage, and just brush it in, I think, and just rinse it off, see where we end up. Now we've thoroughly cleaned up the engine bay, we're going to fit the new starter motor. I think I'm probably best offering this in from the right hand side where you are. Navigating all of the gubbins. There's not a lot of room in here. Ricky's got to get that side. Finally, we've got our cover for our starter motor, which pops underneath this clip ring. There we go. So now it's just onto the rewiring at the back of the starter motor. So we've connected the feed from the starter relay to the solenoid there, and then we've got to connect these two remaining leads onto the main starter. I'm going to double check those torque settings for the motor mounting bolts in due course, but it's well tight at the moment. And that's the electrical connections made, so we are ready to see if we can crank it over and get oil pressure once we've reconnected the battery. So I'm just making the connections again on the battery, so all being well, having replaced what was obviously a burnt out starter motor, we should get crankage and see if the oil light here goes out. And there we go, so we've got positive oil pressure now, so the fresh oil has been circulated around the engine, and it does actually sound very sweet. Very quiet. So we'll turn that off. We're going to drop the fuel tank back on and make the connections. I'll leave the airbox off at the moment. I'm going to put a couple of fuel filters in line to filter the fuel as it goes into the carbs, even though we haven't cleaned the carbs yet. And we'll turn it over and see if it starts. Okay, so now we've managed to set up the fuel filters on both sides of the tank. We might just readjust that if necessary afterwards, but we're ready to allow some fuel to flow through. So I can turn the fuel tap to on, and you can see the fuel filling the carburettor on this side. So the first check will be whether the carbs remain fuel tight. And they seem to be, because the filters have filled but aren't doing any more than that, and the carbs were left dry, so hopefully there's a chance that we might get started. Made sure the tank was clean and put fresh fuel in it, and we've tested that we can get oil pressure to the engine without any fuel going through, and that was really effective. So we're at a stage where we can really go for some startage. So we're going to turn it on. We've got fuel. We're going to open the chokes and let's see whether we can start up. Bearing in mind, there's Sally come to help. She says yes please. Is it going to start, Sammy? I think that's a no. So we'll try again because it's got to get the fuel right through, but there's a good chance that we haven't looked at the ignition system at all yet. So we don't know whether the coils are okay, the plugs looked alright, but we don't know whether we're getting lightning at the plugs. So we're going to have to check that out next if it won't start. Sound like we've got air, we've got fuel. What we haven't got potentially is a spark, so we're going to have to explore that next. Okay, so we have taken the spark plug out, so the engine was turning over. I'm not entirely sure whether we're getting fuel through as the plug wasn't actually wet, but we thought we'd check whether there was a spark, and these are the old plugs. I'm just holding the rubber cap and grounding it out. Okay, do you want to turn it over? And there's no spark there at all. So we're going to swap the plugs as well first, although I suspect that it is the points. So somewhere along on either the points or the coils that have failed. So we're just going to try again with a fresh spark plug just in case.
When you're ready?
Yeah, but don't run it too long. Nothing. Okay. Right, so we know it's not the we're not getting lightning to the plug, so we're going to take the lid off the bean can and have a look at the points first. As often as corrosion on the point surfaces can cause this problem. And then we'll test to see whether or not we're getting electricity to the coils before they come down the HT leads to the spark plugs. Having found that there's no spark, I've just taken the points out of the what they call a bean can here. Normally you replace the points and the condenser together. And I found that the points, if you can see that, but they are pitted and they weren't separating, so that would potentially explain our lack of spark. So I've just cleaned the cam on which the points run, and I'm just going to put some grease on that to lubricate it, just down on here. And then drop the points back in and fit them in position, reconnect them to the condenser, and then we'll see if we'll adjust the gap. Okay, so I'm adjusting the gap. It says 0.35 to 0.4 millimeters. I'm using a 0.38 feeler gauge. It's too wide at the moment. I'm just going to adjust the plate. Still a little too wide. You want it so it just has a lag as you push it through. Spot on now. Refit this outer cover. Getting a shock.
Started?
I took the spark plug away from the case. Yeah, it started.
The bike started?
Yeah, on the petrol that was in it.
Oh. Was there anyone?
I was earthing it. That was good. Don't do that.
Was it electric shocking?
It's the odds. I was getting electric shock.
Things like this now. You're going, I was like, what's happening?
Right, we're going to put the other new plug in.
You gotta put that in. Yeah. You go like this. And I was looking at you like, what's happening?
Because I took it away from the engine, it came right up my arm.
Could you feel it?
Yes.
Is it sore?
So what the hell's going on? Okay, so that was an experience, and now we've got both plugs in, the fuel's turned on, and I've got some choke on this time.
Started.
No smoke.
Hey, nothing at all.
Brilliant. First gear.
Well, that's it for this video. All that fun has quite tired Sally out, so join me next time when we start on the front end rebuild and get immersed in hard chrome.
If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next episode, please like and subscribe below. Catch you next time.